My daughter wept on the phone every Sunday for 5 months after Pierre died, begging me to come live with her family, so I kept very quiet about everything. Pierre and I had spent 30 years building together. By Thursday evening, I was lying on a folding cot behind a pegboard wall of yoga mats and resistance bands, and the guest room I had been promised was stacked to the ceiling with inventory boxes for my daughter's online clothing boutique. I am Claudette Roux. I was 67 years old when Carla asked me to move into her house in Guelph. What she did not know, what almost no one knew, was that Pierre and I had sold our commercial HVAC company to a national contractor 5 years before he passed, and that the sale, combined with 2 rental properties and a carefully managed investment portfolio, had left me with assets worth just under $9.5 million. Pierre had understood machines. I had understood contracts, margins, and the difference between a client who paid on time and one who would drain you with excuses. We started with 1 service van and a rented unit in an industrial park outside Hamilton. By the time we sold, our technicians were maintaining systems in hospitals, school boards, and commercial buildings across 3 provinces. The national company paid us well, and we had been careful with every dollar of it. I dressed carefully too, carefully enough that no one would look at me and see what was behind it. 3 pairs of sensible shoes. A 7-year-old Subaru I kept because it ran perfectly and the heated seats still worked. I still bought store-brand yogurt without thinking about it, a habit Pierre had teased me about until the end. When your first decade in business means watching every invoice, frugality becomes part of how you move through the world. It does not leave just because the balance changes. Carla knew we had done well. She did not know how well. That was deliberate. Pierre had told me, near the end of his illness, that people who knew the number stopped listening to your words. They only heard the figure behind every sentence. Sitting in the hospital room, with his hand in mine, I had thought he was being too careful. After the funeral, after the weeks of silence in our Hamilton house, I began to understand exactly what he meant. Pierre died on a cold February morning, which is the kind of thing that happens in Ontario and still manages to surprise you. He had been at the kitchen table, reading the paper, complaining with great commitment that his coffee was not hot enough. Then it was quiet in a way our house had never been quiet before. After 51 years of marriage, I had never known where silence came from until I heard it that morning. Carla called that same afternoon. She came with her husband Grant and their daughter Manon, who was 15 and had Pierre's habit of watching a room carefully before deciding what to say. They stayed for 4 days. Grant arranged things with the funeral home and made himself useful in the practical way that some people retreat into during grief. Carla sat with me and let me talk. I was grateful for that part. The first time Carla asked me to move in, I said no. This is my home, I told her. She took both my hands and said, Maimon, it's a house full of memories. That isn't the same as a life. The words stung because they reached something true. I was 67. The driveway needed salting. Pierre's tools were still arranged in the garage, the way he had left them. She called every Sunday after that. She described their house in Guelph. The backyard, the quiet street, Sunday dinners, Manon doing homework at the kitchen table. Grant called once too, which surprised me. He said they had plenty of room and that I would not be in the way. He was friendly about it, in a way that felt almost like a presentation. Before I agreed to anything, I asked Carla one question. If I come with nothing extra to contribute, no help with the mortgage, no large sum toward anything, do you still want me? She sounded hurt. Maimon, you're my mother, I'm not asking for money. I believed her because I wanted to. That was my mistake. I kept my Hamilton house rather than selling it. I told Carla the property was still tied up in estate administration, and that most of Pierre's business money was not immediately accessible. That was not entirely false. Everything was properly organized and held in accounts no family member could touch. What I did not mention was the $9.5 million, or the fact that Pierre and I had invested in a small residential building on King Street West 12 years earlier. The building manager knew I might need the top floor unit on short notice. I did not arrive empty-handed. I offered to contribute to groceries and utilities. I brought Manon a proper camera, because she was serious about photography in the way teenagers are when it is actually going to become something. I gave Carla and Grant a check for $4,000, for whatever the household needed during my first month. Grant said it was too generous. He deposited it that afternoon. The guest room Carla had described on the phone, pale walls, a window overlooking the backyard, her grandmother's quilt, was, when I arrived on a Tuesday with 2 suitcases, being used to store boutique inventory, cardboard boxes from floor to shelf, a clothing rack hung with samples, a ring light folded against the window. Carla looked apologetic and said November orders had come in heavier than expected. Just 2 nights, she said. showing me to the small study off the hallway, where a sofa folded out into a narrow bed. I said that was fine. I did not want my first hour in their house to become a complaint. The first evening was almost what she had promised. Manon helped me find the right drawer for my things without being asked. Grant grilled salmon and opened a decent bottle of wine and told a story about a project at work that had everyone laughing. Carla sat close to me and called me Maman and refilled my glass. It felt, for those few hours, like the answer I had been looking for. But at dinner, Grant asked almost as a passing thought what would happen to my Hamilton house. I said it was still under administration. He nodded slowly. It's a strong market right now, he said. Prices are holding even with everything going on with rates. I said I was not thinking about selling. Carla smiled and changed the subject. Grant set down his fork for just a moment before picking it up again. The guest room was not cleared the next morning, or the morning after. On Thursday, Grant mentioned that his colleague Dennis was coming through Guelph for a long weekend and would need a place to stay. His back, Grant said. He can't really manage a pullout. I asked where I would sleep. Carla showed me the space off the laundry room. It had been a mudroom once, then a home gym, and still held a folding cot from when they had refinished the floors 2 summers ago. 2 small windows near the ceiling. A plastic shelf held Grant's rogue equipment, and a bag of rock salt leaned against the wall. Only until Sunday, Carla said. I looked at her. The guest room is still full of boxes. I'll have them moved by Monday, I promise. I thought of Pierre, and the way he had never once asked me to make myself smaller so someone else could be comfortable. I said I would manage for the weekend. That night, Manon came to the mudroom door with 2 blankets and a small space heater. She set them down, looked at the cot, then looked at me. I told Mom you could have my room, she said. She said no. Manon pressed her lips together. She said, Dennis can't handle stairs and your room is on the ground floor. This room. Yeah, this room. She sat on the edge of the cot. After a moment, she told me Carla had been meeting with a contractor, that there were drawings in Grant's office, a studio addition off the back of the house, proper lighting, a client entrance, built-in shelving for the boutique work. She had seen them by accident when she went to print a school assignment. I asked how much of the addition was meant for me. She didn't answer right away. There's a small room at the end, she finally said. The rest is the studio. I asked if she knew who would pay for it. They said you would, she said, after your house sells. I thanked her and told her to go to bed, before her parents noticed she was up. At 11:30, I received a text from the property manager of my Hamilton house. A man claiming to represent my daughter had called that afternoon asking about a fast market assessment and whether the property could be listed quickly. The manager had declined and contacted me immediately. I asked him to send me whatever record he had of the inquiry. The number had been registered to Grant. I lay on the folding cot in the dark and listened to the rock salt settle in the bag against the wall. The next morning, the door from the mudroom into the laundry area was locked. I knocked 3 times before Grant opened it. He looked annoyed, then remembered himself. Sorry, he said. Carla locks up at night. Habit. I needed the bathroom. Of course, use it. He stepped aside and looked at his phone while I passed. Carla was already at the kitchen island with her laptop. She did not acknowledge me until I had poured my own coffee. Then she said, without looking up, we should sit down this weekend and talk about next steps. For the house? She looked up. For everything. Grant has been doing some research and there are options that could work for everyone. I sat across from her. I asked whether those options included me selling my house to fund a studio addition on her property. A pause. We're trying to plan for your future. By improving yours. She closed the laptop. It would give you privacy, a proper space. I have a proper space, it's in Hamilton. Grant came in and sat beside Carla with the ease of someone who had already decided how the conversation would go. He spread a contractor's estimate on the table, $280,000. The line items included insulated flooring, a skylight for photography, a private client entrance, and a storage loft. I read each line carefully. The room designated as mine was at the back, 8 feet by 10. The rest, a professional studio, a showroom wall, a powder room for clients, was labeled quietly but clearly as Carla's workspace. I asked why the powder room was for clients. Grant said it was a shared space. I said I would not be paying for any of it. Carla set down her mug. Where do you expect to live then? I still own my house. You said you couldn't access the money easily. I said the estate administration was not yet complete. I did not say the house was for sale. Grant leaned forward. Claudette, be reasonable. Hamilton prices are strong right now. You'd clear enough to cover the addition and still have something to invest. Your house is sitting there while you sleep on a cot. You put me on the cot. The table went very quiet. I stood and folded the estimate. I will not sign anything, contribute anything, or agree to anything regarding this renovation. I placed the papers in front of Grant, and do not contact my property manager again. He went still. How did you? He texted me. Carla looked at her husband. Grant looked at the table. I returned to the mudroom and called the manager of the King Street building. I asked him to prepare the top floor unit. I would arrive Saturday morning. Dennis came Friday evening, filled both the guest room and every conversation, and was pleasant in the uncomplicated way of someone who has no idea what is happening around him. Grant and he watched something loud in the living room. Carla packaged boutique orders at the kitchen table. Manon sat at the top of the stairs doing homework. I read in the mudroom with the door closed and a blanket over my shoulders, because the space heater had been moved to Dennis's room. Saturday morning I was dressed and standing beside my suitcases by 6:30. Carla opened the laundry room door at 7 and stopped. You're leaving? Yes. Because of one difficult weekend? Because the guest room was never cleared. Because Grant called my property manager without my knowledge. Because there is a $280,000 estimate on your table with my name attached to it, and I agreed to none of it. She looked pale. Mayman. I'm going home. Your house is 40 minutes away. I have another place. She frowned. You told us you couldn't maintain 2 properties. I said maintaining both was manageable. You decided what that meant. A black sedan I had arranged the evening before was idling at the end of the driveway. I carried one bag myself. The driver took the other. Carla stood on the front step in her housecoat watching. Gran appeared in the doorway behind her. Manon was at the upstairs window. She pressed her hand flat against the glass. I pressed mine against the car window as we pulled away. The King Street building had 12 units. Pierre and I had invested in the project when a developer we trusted was converting a former warehouse near the escarpment. We had taken the top floor unit ourselves, 2 bedrooms, a terrace facing west. We had used it after late business meetings, after concerts, when the drive back to Hamilton felt like too much. After Pierre died, I had not been back. The manager had kept it clean. When I walked in Saturday morning, there were fresh flowers on the dining table. The autumn light came through the west windows at an angle that turned everything warm. I stood in the middle of the living room and did not move for a moment. There was no locked door between me and the bathroom, no estimate on the counter, no one's inventory stacked against the wall. I sat in Pierre's chair by the window and cried for a while, not because the weekend had been cruel. It had been, but I had seen it clearly as it happened. I cried because I had still hoped to be wrong about what I was seeing. That Monday I met with Mr. Bowden, my estate lawyer. I explained what had occurred. He confirmed what I had already suspected. Grant and Carla had applied for a home renovation line of credit at one of the major banks. The application stated that a family member would be contributing $250,000 following the sale of a property in Hamilton. A letter was attached, described as a family commitment. It was not signed. It quoted a conversation I had never had. The bank had not approved the loan. They wanted documentation and my written consent. That explained the urgency I had felt in every conversation since I arrived. The $4,000 check I had given them had not been received as generosity. In Grant's mind, it had been evidence that more would follow. I asked Mr. Bowden to arrange a meeting. He contacted both Carla and Grant and told them I wanted to discuss the estate and any shared financial expectations. He named a date. They came. I had suggested we meet at the King Street building, in the boardroom on the main floor that the building management used for tenant matters. When Carla and Grant arrived, the building manager greeted me by name near the elevator and handed me the month-end summary. Grant looked around the lobby. Whose office is this? Mine, I said, partly. Let's go in. We sat at the boardroom table. Mr. Bowden was already there. He walked through the documents methodically. The bank's credit file showed what they had claimed on my behalf. The records from my property manager showed Grant's call. The contractor's estimate showed what the addition was actually designed for. Each document was simple on its own. Together they formed a picture Grant could not describe as a misunderstanding. Carla tried to speak twice. Mr. Bowden let her, then returned to the documents. Finally, Grant said the loan application had been preliminary. They were only exploring options. I placed the unsigned commitment letter on the table. My name is on this. I did not write it. I did not agree to it. Carla looked at the letter for a long time. We thought you would want to help. You believed I would. There is a difference. The room was quiet. Then Grant looked around again. At the boardroom, at the manager standing near the door, at the month-end summary on the table. How much of this building do you actually own? He asked. I opened the summary to the cover page. Pierre and I had taken a 40% stake in the development. After Pierre passed, it transferred to me. The building had 12 residential units, a retail space on the ground floor, and a small parking structure. The assessed value was at the top of the page. Grant read it twice. Carla said quietly, "Is this the only one?" I told her no. There were 2 rental properties, an investment portfolio. The proceeds from the company sale, invested conservatively over 5 years. Everything together came to just under 9.5 million Canadian dollars. Neither of them said anything. Grant recovered first. He leaned back and said, "And you let Carla worry about you every Sunday, thinking you were alone and struggling." I was alone. I was not struggling. You could have told us. Pierre used to say that once someone knows the number, they stop hearing your voice. They only hear the figure. I looked at him steadily. This past week proved he was right. Carla put her hands over her face, not in anger, something else. I told them what I had decided. I would not contribute to the renovation. I would not sell my Hamilton house to fund an addition on their property. I would not guarantee any loan in their names. The $4,000 check was a gift, and I would not ask for it back. Manon's education, university, college, trade school, wherever she chose, would be funded directly through a registered education savings account in her name only. No adult would have access or control over it. My estate would be restructured. Carla would remain a beneficiary, but her inheritance would be held in a managed trust rather than transferred outright, with income distributed over time. Grant would have no access. A significant portion of my estate would go toward a project Pierre and I had spoken about near the end of his life. Supported. Housing for women over 60 who were navigating widowhood, divorce, or financial exploitation after spending a lifetime building something alongside someone else. Grant pushed back from the table. So strangers get millions, and your own daughter gets a managed allowance like she's on probation. The strangers did not put me on a cot in a mudroom while the guest room I was promised held their retail stock. Carla flinched. Grant stood. He said he did not see the point in continuing. He left. Carla stayed. She sat for a while without speaking. Then she said, "The guest room. I always meant to clear it." "I know." Grant said there wasn't time, and then Dennis's visit came up. "I know, Carla." She looked at her hands. The loan application was Grant's idea. He had it worked out before you even arrived. A pause. "I knew about it. I let him do it. I thought you would eventually." She stopped. "I thought you'd want to." "Did you think that? Or did you let yourself think it?" She didn't answer. "I'm sorry," she said at last. It came out smaller than the apology needed to be, but it arrived without condition, without a follow-up request, without pivoting immediately to what might still be salvaged. It was the first entirely honest thing anyone in that house had said to me since Tuesday. I told her I had heard her. We did not embrace. We were not there yet, but she walked out differently than Grant had. Manon called me that evening. She asked if I was all right, and I said yes, I was fine, I was home. She asked if she could visit. I said yes, whenever her parents agreed, and eventually, when she was old enough, whenever she chose herself. Grant told Carla that Manon should not visit, that I was trying to create distance between them and their daughter. Carla allowed one visit the following month anyway. Manon came by bus on a Sunday afternoon because she was 15 and perfectly capable of it, and we ate pasta at the kitchen table while she showed me photographs from her school trip to Quebec City. I did not mention the estate. I did not mention Grant. I was simply her grandmother, and she was simply Manon. In the spring, Carla called to tell me she and Grant were separating. The renovation line of credit had been declined permanently after the bank completed its review. They had borrowed against their home equity for the boutique expansion, and the payments had caught up with them. She was not calling to ask for money. She was calling because she thought I should hear it from her before anyone else told me. I said I was sorry. A marriage ending is hard regardless of the circumstances inside it. She said she was moving into a smaller place with Manon on the east side of Guelph. She asked if I would come for dinner sometime. I said yes. It took several months. Grant moved out. Carla worked through what there was to work through. Partly with a counselor, partly on her own, partly by calling me on Sunday evenings again, not to ask for anything but to talk. I listened. I offered opinions when she wanted them, and held back when she needed to find things herself. That was new for both of us. She came to King Street for the first time in October. She stood at the terrace door looking west toward the escarpment. Papa picked this building, she said. He picked the investment. I picked the unit. She laughed. It sounded like herself again. The women's housing project opened the following March. Pierre had not lived to see it, but his name was on the front of the building. A small residential property near a hospital in Hamilton that we purchased and renovated into 10 self-contained suites for women over 60 who needed time and stability after loss. Each woman kept her own key. No relative could enter without her permission. I had written that condition myself. At the opening, the property manager handed the first resident a small envelope with her key inside. She was 69 years old. She had spent 4 months in her son's basement in Mississauga after her husband died, waiting for her name to be added to a lease she had not chosen. When she opened the door and stepped in for the first time, she stood very still. "There's a window," she said. Not a penthouse window, not a terrace, just a window facing a courtyard with afternoon light coming through it. I knew exactly what she meant. Manon came to the opening with Carla and spent the whole afternoon taking photographs. Candid, unhurried, the kind that catch people mid-sentence or looking away. At the end of the day, she showed me one of me standing, slammed by the front door, talking to the first resident. I had not known she was there. In the photograph, I looked like someone who had made room for herself in her own life. That was Pierre's phrase, one of the last things he wrote to me. He had slipped a card into the drawer beside my side of the bed, the one I found 6 weeks after the funeral. "Make room for yourself in your own life, Claudette. Don't wait to be invited." I framed Manon's photograph and placed it on the shelf above the desk, where Pierre used to review contracts. Carla and I are still rebuilding. Not the relationship we had before, that one had too much silence inside it, too many things left unexamined until they hardened into assumptions. What we have now is slower and more careful and more honest than anything we managed when Pierre was alive to smooth things over between us. She calls on Sundays, sometimes on Wednesdays too, for no particular reason. I still drive the old Subaru, I still buy store-brand yogurt, I still have 3 pairs of shoes. These things no longer feel like a disguise. They feel like the truth of how I have always moved through the world. As someone who built something real and knows what it actually costs, and who will not allow it to be spent by people who only ever saw it as a number waiting to be accessed. Pierre was right about that. He was right about most things. But he was right about this most of all. You do not have to wait to be invited into your own life. At 67, lying on a folding cot beside a bag of rock salt in my daughter's mudroom, I finally understood what he meant. I opened the door myself.